They laughed at her tattoo in the brutal fire of Navy SEAL training, mocking her when she was at her weakest. But they had no idea that same tattoo carried a secret so powerful it would make the toughest warriors fall silent and force the commander himself to salute. Before we begin this shocking story of courage, betrayal, and redemption, make sure you subscribe right now, because what happens next will leave you speechless. The training grounds of Coronado were alive with the roar of waves and the cold bite of Pacific air, the kind of place where human weakness was exposed like raw flesh under a knife. And among the rows of men who had gathered with broken bodies and half-broken spirits to prove themselves as warriors of the Navy SEALs, there stood one woman, Elena Carter, her jaw tight, her breath steady, and her eyes filled with the kind of fire that only those who had faced years of hidden battles could carry. But the others didn't see that. They only saw an outsider, someone they believed didn't belong, and their laughter often followed her every move, none louder than the moment they first caught a glimpse of the tattoo on her shoulder blade when her shirt soaked through from endless surf torture clung to her skin and slid just enough to reveal the dark ink etched across her back, a design that at first glance seemed out of place in the harsh, uniformed world of military discipline. And when Rawlings, a tall, broad-shouldered candidate with arrogance etched deeper than his muscles, spotted it, he couldn't resist, his cruel laugh cutting through the air like a blade as he shouted, "What the hell is that?" A little souvenir from a biker bar, and others equally exhausted and desperate for a reason to divert their misery joined in, their laughter echoing across the shoreline, and Elena, though her body ached from the cold and her mind screamed for rest, refused to let her eyes shift, refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break, because the tattoo they mocked was not ink for beauty or rebellion. It was ink for memory, for blood, for sacrifice. A mark that carried a story none of them were ready to understand. But for now, she let them laugh, because silence was her weapon and endurance her shield. And when the instructors barked orders, their voices hoarse from hours of yelling, and the candidates dropped into the sand for push-ups with the cold grains, cutting into their palms, she pushed with every ounce of stubborn pride she had. Every repetition, a promise to herself that she wouldn't be the first to quit, wouldn't let their laughter define her, because in her mind, quitting wasn't just failure. It was betrayal. Betrayal of the name the tattoo carried, the name carved in quiet lines within the design, hidden but always with her. The name of someone who had once stood where she stood now, who had bled for the same flag but hadn't lived to carry it forward. And though she didn't speak of it, every drop of salt water and sweat on her skin was a reminder that she wasn't here just for herself. And that night, long after the laughter had faded into snores and groans of the resting candidates, Elena sat alone on the edge of her bunk, her hands shaking not from weakness, but from the chill that seemed to live in her bones after days of near drowning and sleepless torment. And she traced the edge of her tattoo with her fingertips, remembering the voice of her brother Daniel, a Navy SEAL who never came back from deployment, the brother whose coffin she had saluted when she was just 19, the brother whose last words to her before leaving had been, "If you want to honor me, don't just live, fight." And she had carried those words like armor, and when she enlisted, people told her it was impossible, that SEAL training was beyond her reach. But impossible was a word she had learned to despise. And now, as she stared at the dark ink, she whispered, "I'm still here. Daniel, I won't let them break me." And the next morning, Hell Week resumed, with candidates dragged across the sand like broken toys, but Elena's spirit held even when Rawlings tried again, leaning close during a run to hiss, "You'll never make it, princess. Tattoos don't make warriors." And she didn't answer him, didn't waste breath. But the silence seemed to sting him more than words. And though he laughed louder, there was an edge of frustration in it, because no matter how much they mocked, she refused to bend. And in the unspoken rules of training, sometimes silence was the loudest defiance. And what none of them knew was that her silence was not just pride, but protection. Because the true meaning of the tattoo, the story behind it, was something that, if revealed, could change everything, And while they saw ink as weakness, soon they would see it as legacy. And when the day came that the commander's eyes fell on it, their laughter would die in their throats, replaced by the weight of a salute. The days grew harsher as training pushed the candidates past the limits of flesh and bone, and Elena found herself carrying not just the weight of her own exhaustion, but also the pressure of constant doubt cast by those around her. Every run through the freezing surf, every log carry, every endless hour of being drenched and screamed at was meant to break her. Yet while others collapsed and rang the bell to quit, she clenched her jaw and endured because every ounce of pain reminded her of the promise she had made to her brother. And though the men around her mocked the tattoo more than once, whispering that it was nothing more than cheap ink, Elena knew the truth they didn't, that the design carried the insignia of a fallen SEAL unit. The very unit her brother had served in before losing his life in an operation that was classified and buried under silence. And while she kept that truth locked away, her determination grew sharper, and even the instructors began to notice that while her body trembled like everyone else's, her spirit seemed unbreakable. And one evening, as the sun bled into the horizon and the candidates staggered back to camp, one of the quieter men, Torres, glanced at her tattoo and asked in a voice low enough not to draw attention, "That mark? It means something, doesn't it?" But Elena only gave him a hard look and walked on without answering, because for now the secret had to remain hers. And in the silence of that choice she carried forward into the darkness, knowing that the day would come when the meaning of the ink would no longer be hidden. By the third phase of training, the torment had reached a level that stripped away every illusion of strength, and men who had walked in with swagger now limped under the crushing weight of exhaustion. Yet Elena still pressed on, her body battered, but her eyes sharp. And it was during a night exercise in the freezing surf when Betrayal surfaced, because Rawlings, still unable to stomach being outlasted by her, deliberately loosened his grip on the boat they carried, shifting the full weight onto her shoulders. And though her knees nearly buckled, she forced herself upright, gritting her teeth until blood filled her mouth, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her fall. And later, when they stumbled back onto the sand, she caught Torres watching, with a flicker of respect in his eyes, a silent acknowledgement that she was no longer just surviving, but proving stronger than many of the men who had mocked her. And yet, beneath her endurance, the pressure of the secret she carried grew heavier, because one of the instructors, a seasoned veteran named Commander Hale, had paused longer than usual when his eyes brushed across the edge of her tattoo, his brow furrowing as if recognition stirred in him. And though he said nothing, Elena felt a chill run through her veins, because if he truly knew what the tattoo represented, then her entire presence here was not just personal, but tied to a history the Navy itself had buried. And the thought of that truth surfacing too soon filled her with both fear and a strange sense of inevitability. The final trial came with the brutal dawn, the kind of test designed to break even the strongest, as the candidates were pushed through the surf again and again until their bodies shook with violent tremors. And Elena, though every muscle screamed, refused to stop, dragging herself forward while others collapsed around her, and when the group finally staggered back to the beach, Commander Hale stood waiting, his eyes scanning each face with the cold precision of a man who had seen generations of warriors either rise or break, and then his gaze fell on Elena, lingering not on her exhausted face, but on the soaked shirt clinging to her back, where the full shape of her tattoo was revealed in the pale morning light. And for a long moment silence cut through the chaos as Hale's expression shifted from hardness to something like stunned recognition, and without hesitation he stepped forward and snapped a salute, his voice low but firm as he said, "Carter, you carry the mark of SEAL Team 12, and the legacy of men who never returned." And the entire line of candidates froze, their eyes wide as the mocking laughter they had once thrown at her turned to disbelief, for in that instant they understood that the ink they had ridiculed was not decoration but a memorial, a badge of sacrifice, carved into her skin to honor her brother and his fallen unit. And Elena, trembling with exhaustion yet standing tall, finally let her eyes meet theirs, not with anger or vengeance, but with the quiet pride of someone who had endured every insult, every trial, and now stood vindicated. And as the silence deepened on that shore, it was clear that the girl they had mocked was no longer just another trainee. She was a symbol, and even the commander himself had bowed his respect to her legacy.